Ivanka Trump discovers Secret Service files. The truth about January 6th changes everything. The Miami sunset painted Ivanka Trump's home office in shades of amber and gold. Outside, palm trees swayed gently in the evening breeze, their shadows dancing across the polished marble floor. It was December 2025, and like most nights lately, she found herself working late, trying to organize the remnants of her past life in Washington. "Mom, are you still working?" Her daughter's voice drifted in from the doorway. Ivanka looked up, offering a tired smile. "Just for a little while longer. Sweetie, these boxes won't sort themselves. Dad says you're becoming a hermit with all these old papers." "Did he now?" Ivanka chuckled, running a hand through her blonde hair. "Tell your father I'm just being thorough. You know how I am about organization." After her daughter left, Ivanka sighed, looking at the mountain of boxes still waiting to be sorted. She'd been putting this off for months, years, really. Moving to Miami had meant hastily packing up their Washington life, throwing documents and memories into boxes without much thought. Now, with the holidays approaching, she'd finally decided to tackle the task. Mrs. Kushner, her assistant, Maria, appeared at the door. "I brought you fresh coffee. Do you need help with anything else before I head out?" "No, thank you, Maria. Have a good night." Ivanka accepted the steaming cup gratefully. "Oh, wait, could you make sure those charity event briefs are on my desk for tomorrow morning?" "Already done," Maria smiled. "And Mr. Kushner called. He'll be late tonight. Some issue with the Singapore deal. Alone again." Ivanka turned back to the boxes. Most contained what you'd expect: policy briefings, schedule printouts, correspondence from her time as an advisor. She'd been surprised by how much paper they'd accumulated, despite everything being supposedly digital these days. Her phone buzzed, a text from Don Jr. asking about Christmas plans. "Still coming to Mar-a-Lago," her brother had written. "Dad's asking." Ivanka stared at the message for a moment before responding. Of course, wouldn't miss it. She put the phone down and reached for another box, this one unmarked except for a hastily scrawled 2021 on its side. Inside were more familiar items, photographs from her last days in office, thank you notes from staff, a few personal items she'd forgotten about. "Oh, I remember this," she murmured, pulling out a silver frame containing a photo of her family. On their last day in Washington, they all looked so different then, tenser, perhaps, more guarded. The next few items were unremarkable: old magazines, some press clippings, routine correspondence. Her eyes were growing tired, the words beginning to blur. Maybe she should call it a night. That's when her fingers brushed against something different. A thick manila envelope, heavier than it should be, tucked between two folders. She frowned, not recognizing it. The envelope was unmarked, sealed, with a simple metal clasp. "That's odd," she said aloud, turning it over in her hands. She was usually meticulous about labeling everything. This felt out of place. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Don Jr., this time with photos of his kids. She smiled, typed a quick response, then turned back to the mysterious envelope. For a moment, she considered adding it to the to-sort later pile. It was getting late, after all, but something about its weight, its unmarked presence among her carefully organized files, nagged at her. Just one more thing to check, she told herself, reaching for her letter opener. The envelopes. Contents slid out onto her desk, a stack of papers, some with official letterhead she recognized immediately. Secret Service communications, internal reports, radio transcripts. Her heart skipped a beat as she noticed the dates. January 5th and 6th, 2021. "This can't be," she whispered, her coffee forgotten as she began to read. The first page was a security briefing, marked eyes only at the top. Nothing unusual there. She'd seen hundreds of such reports, but as she continued reading, her hands began to tremble. Mrs. Kushner. It was the night security guard, making his rounds. "Sorry to disturb you, but I noticed your light was still on. Everything okay?" Ivanka quickly slid the papers back into the envelope. "Yes, Thomas, everything's fine. Just lost track of time. Want me to leave the exterior lights on for you? Please. I won't be much longer." But as the guard's footsteps faded away, Ivanka knew she wouldn't be leaving anytime soon. Her fingers trembled as she pulled the papers out again, spreading them across her desk. These weren't just any files. These were the unredacted communications between agents on the ground that day. Names she recognized jumped out at her, along with conversations that contradicted everything she thought she knew about. January 6th, her phone buzzed again. Jared this time. She silenced it. "This isn't possible," she muttered, reaching for her reading glasses. But the words didn't change. If anything, they became clearer, more damning. A crash from somewhere in the house made her jump. Just the housekeeper, she realized, probably finishing up in the kitchen. But her heart was racing now, her palms sweaty as she turned page after page. There were radio transcripts showing conversations she'd never heard about, security assessments that had never been made public, and most disturbing of all, evidence that several key players had known about potential violence days before, but had chosen to remain silent. She reached for her coffee with shaking hands, only to find it cold. How long had she been reading? The clock on her desk showed nearly midnight. Her daughter's voice drifted down the hallway again. "Mom, are you coming up soon?" "Just a few more minutes, honey," Ivanka called back, her voice surprisingly steady. Despite the chaos in her mind, she looked down at the papers spread across her desk. Documents that could rewrite history. Documents that would change everything. For her country, for her family, for herself. Her phone lit up again, her father's face appearing on the screen. For the first time in her life, she deliberately pressed decline. As the Miami night deepened outside her window, Ivanka Trump sat alone in her office, surrounded by papers that would force her to make the hardest decision of her life. But that decision could wait until morning. Right now, she had to focus on understanding exactly what she'd found. She reached for her phone again, this time to make a call she never thought she'd have to make. "David, I'm sorry to call so late." "Yes, I know what time it is. I need you to come to the house now. And David, don't tell anyone you're coming. Not anyone." As she waited for her lawyer to arrive, Ivanka began methodically photographing each page with her phone, her hands still shaking, but her mind increasingly clear. Whatever happened next, she needed to ensure these documents couldn't disappear as mysteriously as they had appeared. The distant sound of waves crashing against the Miami shore provided a steady rhythm as she worked, her world shrinking to the size of her desk, to these papers that would change everything. Outside, palm trees continued their gentle dance in the breeze, unaware that history was being rewritten in the quiet house behind them. "Mrs. Kushner," Thomas's voice came through the intercom. "There's a Mr. Richardson here to see you." Ivanka took a deep breath, straightening her posture. "Send him up, Thomas." "And Thomas?" "We were never here tonight. Understand?" "Yes, Mum." As footsteps approached her office, Ivanka looked once more at the damning papers before her. There would be no going back after tonight. No pretending she hadn't seen what she'd seen. No maintaining the carefully constructed version of events she'd clung to for years. The door opened, and David Richardson, her lawyer of 20 years, stepped in. One look at his client's face told him everything he needed to know. "How bad is it?" he asked, closing the door behind him. Ivanka gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Sit down, David. This is going to take a while." Outside, the Miami night grew deeper, stars twinkling indifferently above a house where truth and loyalty were about to wage war. With a woman caught in the middle, facing a choice that would echo through history. The first page of documents lay before her, its words now seared into her memory, waiting to be shared. But first, she had to be absolutely certain of the facts, certain of the consequences, certain of herself. "Start from the beginning," David said, pulling out his notepad. "Tell me everything." And so, in the quiet of her Miami office, surrounded by the ghosts of her past and the weight of what was to come, Ivanka Trump began to speak. "I was just sorting through old files," Ivanka began, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. "These were in an unmarked envelope. David, look at the timestamp on this first transmission." David adjusted his glasses, leaning forward. "January 5th, 2021, 14:30 hours. His eyes widened as he read further. "This can't be authentic. These codes here, they're real. Ivanka cut in. I remember these protocols. We used them daily. The lawyer ran a hand through his graying hair. Who else knows about this? No one. I just found them. She stood up, pacing behind her desk. The question is, who put them in that box? A soft knock interrupted them. Ivanka's daughter poked her head in again. Mom, I can't sleep. What's going on? Why is Mr. Richardson here? Just some boring legal work. Sweetheart, go back to bed. I'll come check on you soon. Ivanka forced a smile until the door closed. David waited until the footsteps faded. Have you told Jared? Not yet. I haven't told anyone. She sank back into her chair. Look at page 7. As David read, his professional composure cracked. These radio transcripts, they contradict everything in the official reports. Exactly. Ivanka pulled up another document on her laptop. Here's what was submitted to the January 6th committee. Compare the timestamps. Her phone buzzed again. Don Jr. for the third time. She ignored it. Mrs. Trump, David started. Ivanka, please, we're way past formalities tonight. Ivanka, we need to consider all angles here. These documents, if they're authentic, they don't just implicate some random officials. They show I know exactly what they show, David. Her voice cracked slightly. And who they implicate. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 1 a.m. Ivanka walked to her office window, looking out at the moonlit ocean. Memories flooded back. Countless meetings, conversations, moments she'd witnessed firsthand. Everything looked different now, Mom. Her son's voice this time. Are you still awake? Go back to bed. Honey, everything's fine. David waited until they were alone again. We need to verify these independently. I know someone. No. Ivanka turned sharply. No one else can know. Not yet. First, I need to understand everything in here. She returned to her desk, pulling out more papers. Look at these messages between the agents. The timing doesn't match what we were told. And these names here. She pointed to several redacted lines. I know who these people are, David. I worked with them daily. Her phone lit up again, Jared's face appearing on the screen. This time, she answered. Hey, everything okay? It's late. Just finishing up some work, she replied, trying to keep her voice normal. Don't wait up. Your father's been trying to reach you. Something about Christmas arrangements. I'll call him tomorrow. Love you. She ended the call, hands shaking worse than before. David watched her carefully. You're going to have to talk to him eventually. I know. She picked up another document. But first, I need to be absolutely certain about everything in here. Look at this next section. They worked through the files methodically, piece by piece. Each new page seemed to reveal another layer of what had really happened. Not just on January 6th, but in the days leading up to it. At 2:30 a.m., Thomas radioed up again. Mrs. Kushner, there's a call from Mar-a-Lago on the secure line. Ivanka and David exchanged glances. Take a message, Thomas. Say I'm unavailable. Yes, ma'am. David leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. We need to talk about next steps. These files, they're not just evidence. They're a weapon. They're the truth. Ivanka corrected him. The truth that someone wanted me to find. But why you? Why now? Before she could answer, her personal cell phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. Now you know. Be careful who you trust. Ivanka showed the message to David, her hand trembling. We need to move these somewhere secure, he said. Tonight. Already done. She pointed to her phone. I've photographed everything and uploaded it to multiple secure locations. The originals. She patted her desk drawer. They stay with me for now. David nodded approvingly. Smart. But Ivanka, you need to understand what happens next. Once this gets out, and it will get out, there's no going back. Not for you, not for your family, not for anyone. She walked to her office door, checking that the hallway was empty. When she returned, her face was set with determination. Do you remember what my father always used to say about loyalty, David? That it's the most important thing in the world. Yes. She picked up the first page of documents again. But he never specified loyalty to what? To whom? Outside, the first hints of dawn were beginning to lighten the Miami sky. Soon, her children would be waking up for school. Jared would be heading to the office. The world would begin another normal day. But in this room, with these papers spread, Before her, Ivanka Trump knew that normal was about to become a distant memory. The weight of what she'd discovered pressed down on her like a physical force, but somehow, she felt lighter than she had in years. "We keep going," she said firmly. "We go through every page, every transmission, every name." And then, David prompted. Ivanka looked at the photo on her wall, her family, smiling, from happier times. "And then we tell the truth, all of it." Her phone buzzed one final time. Another message from the unknown number. "Others know. Time is running out." The Miami sunrise began to paint her office in shades of pink and gold. A new day dawning as Ivanka Trump faced the biggest decision of her life. But first, there were more papers to read, more truth to uncover, more pieces of the puzzle to put together, and somewhere, someone was watching, waiting to see what she would do with the explosive truth they'd placed in her hands. The morning sun had barely risen when Ivanka and David arrived at his private office, in a discreet building in downtown Miami. Dark circles under their eyes betrayed their sleepless night, but adrenaline kept them sharp. "No one knows we're here?" Ivanka asked, clutching her designer bag containing the files. "Just my security team. They're discreet. Been with me 20 years. David locked the door behind them. "Even my secretary thinks it's Sunday." The office was a stark contrast too. Ivanka's warm home study, all steel and glass, with views of Biscayne Bay. A place built for secrets. "I need coffee," Ivanka sighed, sinking into a leather chair. "Real coffee. Not that fancy stuff you usually serve." David managed a tired smile. "Martha, to coffees, black. Strong as you can make it." While they waited, Ivanka's phone buzzed. Again, Jared. "Hey, where are you? The kids said you were gone when they woke up." She had prepared for this. Emergency meeting about the Singapore project. Didn't want to wake you. On a Saturday. You know how these international deals are. "I'll be home later." After hanging up, she looked at David. "How long can we keep this quiet?" Before he could answer, Martha brought in their coffee. The elderly secretary had been with David's firm longer than anyone could remember. She took one look at Ivanka's face and frowned. "You look like you've seen a ghost, dear." "Something like that, Martha." "Thank you." Once they were alone again, David spread the files across his conference table. "Let's go through this systematically. First, we need to verify every name, every timestamp." "I've been thinking about that," Ivanka said, pulling out her laptop. "I still have access to some old scheduling databases. We can cross-reference." Her voice trailed off as her phone lit up with another message from the unknown number. "Check the mall security footage. Camera 4, Sector B, David." She showed him the message. "They're watching us," he muttered. Closely, they worked through the morning, piecing together a timeline that grew more disturbing by the hour. Around noon, Martha buzzed in. "Mrs. Kushner, your brother's here." Ivanka froze. "Which one?" "Don Jr." David quickly gathered the files while Ivanka composed herself. "Send him in." Don Jr. burst through the door, his face a mix of concern and irritation. "What the hell, Ivanka? Dad's been trying to reach you all night. And what are you doing at your lawyer's office on a Saturday? How did you find me? Please, you think I don't have people keeping an eye on my little sister?" He tried to sound casual, but something in his tone set off alarm bells. "Don, I'm in the middle of something important. More important than family." He glanced at the papers. David was trying to discreetly cover. "What's all this? Singapore project documentation?" David interjected smoothly. "Highly confidential." Don Jr. wasn't buying it. "Since when do you handle international real estate deals, David? You're a political lawyer." The tension in the room could be cut with a knife. Ivanka's phone buzzed again. The unknown number. "He knows something. Be careful, Don." Ivanka said carefully, "I'll call Dad later today. Right now, I need to focus on this." Her brother studied her face for a long moment. "You know, it's funny. I got a weird call last night. Someone asking if I'd seen any unusual documents lately." Ivanka's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her face neutral. "What kind of documents?" "They didn't say, but they seemed very interested in our old White House files." He moved closer to the conference table. "Anything I should know about, sis?" David stepped between them. "Mr. Trump, your sister is my client. This meeting is privileged, is it? Don Jr. smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Everything okay, Ivanka? You seem tense. She thought of the files, of the revelations they contained, of her brother's possible involvement. Everything's fine, Don. Just busy with work. He lingered for a moment longer, then shrugged. All right, keep your secrets. But Dad wants you to call him, soon. After he left, Ivanka collapsed into her chair. He knows something. The question is what, David mused, and who sent him. They spent the next hour strengthening their digital security, moving files to encrypted drives, setting up secure communication channels. Ivanka's phone kept buzzing with family messages, each one more insistent than the last. Asterisk around 2 o'clock. Martha buzzed again. Mrs. Kushner, there's a man here, says he's Secret Service. Former Secret Service. Ivanka and David exchanged glances. Name, Michael Anderson. The name hit Ivanka like a punch to the gut. She knew that name. It was in the files. Send him in. The man who entered was in his 60s, with the rigid posture of someone who'd spent decades in service. His hands were shaking. Asterisk Mrs. Kushner, he said quietly, we need to talk about what you found. How do you know what I found? Anderson closed the door carefully. Because I'm the one who put it there. The revelation hung in the air like smoke. David reached for his phone, but Anderson raised a hand. Please, no calls, not yet. You need to hear this first. Ivanka studied the man's face. She remembered him from her White House days. Always professional, always in the background. Why? She asked simply. Anderson sank into a chair, suddenly looking every bit his age. Because I couldn't live with it anymore. The lies, the cover-up. But I couldn't just release everything. They have buried it. It had to be someone they couldn't ignore, someone with credibility. So you chose me. You were always different. He said quietly, even back then. You saw things clearly, but you were caught in the middle. Like so many of us. David interrupted. Mr. Anderson, you realize what you're admitting to. I do. He pulled out his own phone, showing them a video. And I have more, much more, for the next hour. Anderson filled in the gaps in their understanding. Names became stories. Timestamps became moments of decision. The full picture began to emerge. And it was worse than Ivanka had imagined. Her phone buzzed again. Her father. This time, she stared at the screen until it went dark. They'll come after you, Anderson said gently. All of you. Me, everyone involved. Why now? Ivanka asked. Why after all this time? Because they're planning something bigger, and they're using the old lies to build new ones. He stood up, straightening his jacket. You have until Monday. After that, others will start talking, some to tell the truth, some to bury it. After Anderson left, Ivanka and David sat in silence for a long moment. We need to move faster, she finally said. Get everything ready. For what? For the truth. She pulled up her phone, starting to type. But first, I need to talk to Jared. He deserves to hear this from me. As she dialed her husband's number, another text came through from the unknown number. Anderson told you the truth, but not all of it. There's more. Keep looking. David watched his client's face as she waited for Jared to answer. In all their years working together, he'd never seen her look so determined. Jared, can you come to David's office? There's something you need to see. She paused, listening. No, it can't wait. And honey, come alone. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the office as they waited for Jared to arrive. Every passing car made them tense. Every phone buzz felt like a threat. Martha brought more coffee and sandwiches they didn't touch. The files lay spread across the table like a puzzle missing crucial pieces. Mrs. Kushner? Martha's voice came through the intercom again. Mr. Kushner is here. Ivanka took a deep breath, straightening her posture. Send him in. As the door opened, she realized this was the moment everything would truly change. Not just for her, but for everyone she loved. Jared stepped in, looking concerned. Ivanka? What's going on? Why all the mystery? She gestured to the chair across from her. Sit down, honey. There's something you need to see. Outside, Miami life continued as normal. But in that office, with the weight of history pressing down on them, nothing would ever be normal again. Jared sat down slowly. his eyes moving between Ivanka and David. Then to the scattered papers on the conference table. "You're scaring me," he said quietly. "What's this about?" Ivanka reached for the first file. "Last night, I found something in the old boxes from Washington." Her hand trembled slightly as she passed him the documents. These were hidden in an unmarked envelope. As Jared began to read, his face drained of color. "This can't be real." "It is," Anderson spoke up from the corner where he'd been quietly observing. "I know because I was there." Jared startled, noticing the former agent for the first time. "Who?" "Michael Anderson, Secret Service." Ivanka explained. "He's the one who made sure I found these." Jared stood up abruptly, pacing the room. "Do you have any idea what this means for us?" "For the kids, I do," Ivanka said firmly. "But it also means we can't pretend anymore. We can't hide from what really happened." Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. "Your father knows something's wrong. Security team at Mar-a-Lago mobilizing." Jared read the message over her shoulder. "We need to get the kids somewhere safe." "Already taken care of," David interjected. "I have a security team watching them." Anderson cleared his throat. "There's something else you need to see." He pulled out a small USB drive. "This contains security footage that was supposedly lost that day." As they watched the footage on David's laptop, the room grew unbearably tense. Conversations they'd never heard. Moments that had been carefully hidden from public view. "Stop," Ivanka suddenly said. "Go back 30 seconds. She leaned closer to the screen. "That man there, I know him. He was..." Her voice trailed off as her phone rang. Eric this time. "Sis, you need to call Dad right now. He's not taking this well." "Taking what well?" "Someone sent him some kind of message about files, old files. He's been locked in his office all morning." Ivanka muted the phone. "They're moving faster than we thought." Anderson nodded grimly. "They'll try to get ahead of this, create their own narrative." Jared was still processing the footage. "Some of these people are still in positions of power. They're planning runs for office." "Exactly," Anderson said. "That's why it had to come out now." A sharp knock on the door made everyone jump. Martha's voice came through. "Mrs. Kushner, there are some men here. They say they're from Mar-a-Lago security." David moved quickly to lock the door. "Back entrance." "Now, no," Ivanka said firmly. "No more running. No more hiding." She straightened her shoulders. "Let them in, Martha." Two men in dark suits entered. Faces Ivanka recognized from her father's security team. "Miss Trump." The taller one said, "Your father requests your presence at Mar-a-Lago immediately." Jared stepped forward. "She's busy." It wasn't a request. Anderson moved subtly, positioning himself between Ivanka and the men. "I believe the lady made her position clear." The tension in the room crackled like electricity. Ivanka's phone buzzed one final time. "Now you have to choose." She looked at the faces around her. Jared, torn between loyalty and truth. David, ready to protect his client at any cost. Anderson, carrying the weight of secrets for too long. And her father's men, waiting to escort her back into the familiar world of comfortable lies. "Tell my father," she said clearly, "that I'll speak to him when I'm ready. And tell him..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Tell him I know about Camera 4, Sector B." The security men exchanged glances. Without another word, they left. "That was a warning shot," Anderson said quietly. "They'll be back." Jared took Ivanka's hand. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." She squeezed his hand, then turned to David. "How quickly can you arrange a secure location for a press conference?" "You're going public?" David asked. "Not yet. First, we gather everyone who needs to know. Everyone who can corroborate what's in these files." She looked at Anderson. "You said others would start talking by Monday. Let's make sure they're talking to us first." As the afternoon faded into evening, they worked frantically, making calls, verifying sources, building an ironclad case. Every few minutes, Ivanka's phone would buzz with messages from family members, each more urgent than the last. Around 7, Martha brought in dinner they barely touched. The files had grown into a sprawling web of evidence across the conference table. Names were connected with red string, timestamps highlighted, contradictions noted. "Look at this," Jared said suddenly, pointing to a document. The signature here, it doesn't match the official records. Anderson leaned in. Because it's the real one. The one in the records was forged. Ivanka's phone rang again. Don Jr. last chance, sis. He said without preamble, whatever you think you know, whatever you think you have to do. There's another way. Is there? She asked quietly. Family first, always, remember? She thought of the footage they'd just watched, of the lies hidden beneath layers of loyalty. I remember everything, Don. That's the problem. After she hung up, Jared watched her carefully. What do you want to do? Ivanka looked at the chaos spread across the table, evidence of a truth too big to hide, too important to ignore. David, call every reporter you trust, every editor who can't be bought, every official who still believes in the truth. She stood up, her decision made. By this time tomorrow, everyone will know. They'll try to stop you, Anderson warned. Let them try. As night fell over Miami, Ivanka Trump sat in her lawyer's office, surrounded by proof of a history that would soon be rewritten. Her phone had finally stopped buzzing, the calm before the storm. Tomorrow would bring chaos. Tomorrow would bring consequences. But tonight, she had work to do. One more thing, Anderson said, pulling out another envelope. These just came in. You need to see them before you make your final decision. As Ivanka opened the new documents, she realized that everything she'd discovered so far was just the beginning. The real storm was still coming. The next morning exploded like a bomb. By 6 a.m., every major network had broken into their regular programming. Ivanka watched from David's office as the headlines scrolled across multiple screens. Breaking, Secret Service files from January 6th. Surface exclusive. New evidence challenges official Capitol riot narrative sources. Ivanka Trump in possession of explosive January 6th documents. It's starting, David said, handing her a fresh coffee. How are you holding up? Before she could answer, her phone rang. CNN. No comment, David said quickly. But Ivanka held up her hand. Let me take this. We need to control the narrative, she answered, putting it on speaker. This is Ivanka Trump. Ms. Trump, this is Jake Tapper. We're receiving reports about classified Secret Service documents in your possession. Would you care to comment? Not at this time, Jake, but I will be making a statement soon. As soon as she hung up, Fox News called, then MSNBC, then the New York Times. Mrs. Kushner, Martha buzzed in, sounding overwhelmed. There are reporters gathering outside the building. Jared, who had been watching the news coverage intently, turned to his wife. We need to get you somewhere secure. This is going to get worse before it gets better. A text message flashed on Ivanka's phone, from Eric. What have you done? Then another from Don Jr. Dad's furious. Fix this, now. Anderson, who had stayed through the night helping them organize the evidence, looked up from his laptop. You've got incoming. Mar-a-Lago just released a statement. They all turned to the nearest screen where their father's spokesperson was addressing reporters. Any documents allegedly in Ms. Trump's possession are either fake or were obtained illegally. This is nothing more than a politically motivated attack. Well, that didn't take long. Jared muttered. Ivanka's phone buzzed again. The unknown number. More files coming. Key players are starting to talk. Stay strong. Suddenly, Martha's voice came through again, urgent this time. Mrs. Kushner. There's someone here. Says he was there that day. Says he needs to speak with you immediately. Ivanka looked at Anderson, who nodded. Description. Mid-50s, military bearing. Says his name is Thomas Reynolds. Anderson's face went pale. Tom's here. Let him in. Now, the man who entered was sweating, despite the office's cool air conditioning. They know I'm here, he said without preamble. They're trying to contain this, but it's too late. Others are coming forward. Who? David demanded. Everyone. Agents who were on the ground. Staff who overheard things. People who've been carrying these secrets for years. Reynolds pulled out his phone. Look at this. He showed them a group chat, dozens of former Secret Service agents and staffers, all sharing their own pieces of the puzzle. Ivanka's phone rang again. Her father this time. She stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. Daddy, what are you doing, honey? His voice was controlled, but she could hear the tension. Whatever you think you have. Whatever you think you know. You need to stop this now. It's too late, she said quietly. The truth is already out there. The truth. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Whose truth? You think you know what happened that day. You weren't even there for most of it. No, but they were. She looked at Anderson and Reynolds. And they've been carrying this burden for too long. Burden. They took an oath. To protect. To serve. To keep secrets. To protect the country, she corrected. Not to hide the truth from it. There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Colder. You're making a mistake, Ivanka. A mistake that will hurt this family. Hurt your children. No, she said firmly. The mistake was staying silent for so long. She ended the call, hands shaking. Jared moved to comfort her, but before he could, Martha buzzed again. Mrs. Kushner, there's a protest forming outside. Both sides, it's getting heated. David went to the window. Below, crowds were gathering. Some supporting Ivanka, others condemning her. Signs were already appearing. Tell the truth competing with Trump family traitor. We need to move, Anderson said urgently. This location is compromised. Reynolds nodded. I have a safe house ready. Trusted people only. Ivanka's phone lit up with another message from the unknown number. Capitol Police files coming. Next, bigger than you thought. Much bigger. As if on cue, every screen in the office suddenly showed breaking news. Multiple Secret Service agents come. Forward January 6th narrative challenged. It's happening faster than we expected. David said, watching the coverage. Anderson checked his phone. My contacts say at least a dozen agents are ready to testify. They've been waiting for this moment, waiting for someone to go first. A crash from outside made them all jump. The protests were getting louder. Martha's voice came through, shaking slightly. Mrs. Kushner, the police are here. They say they need to clear the building. Jared looked at his wife. What do you want to do? Before she could answer, her phone buzzed with rapid-fire messages. Don Jr., stop this madness now. Eric, you're destroying everything we built. Unknown number. Don't back down. More proof coming. CNN, request for immediate interview. FBI. We need to speak with you regarding classified documents. The room seemed to spin as the weight of everything pressed down on her. Outside, the crowds grew larger, their chants echoing off the glass buildings. Reynolds stepped forward. Mrs. Trump, we need to move now, before they block all the exits. David was already gathering the files. I have a backup location. Secure. Private. Anderson checked his phone again. 3 more agents just went public. It's spreading. Ivanka stood in the middle of it all, watching as the world she'd known began to crumble. On the screens, pundits were already debating the implications. Her father's supporters were calling her a traitor. Her father's opponents were calling her a hero. Neither label felt right. Double quotes Mrs. Kushner. Martha's voice again, more urgent now. They're trying to evacuate the building, and there's a call from the White House on line 1. The room fell silent. Everyone turned to Ivanka. She thought of her children, probably watching this unfold on TV. She thought of her father, raging at Mar-a-Lago. She thought of all the people who'd carried these secrets for years, finally finding the courage to speak. Put them through, she said. As she reached for the phone, another text came through, from her mother this time. Whatever you decide, I understand. Be careful. The world outside was chaos, but in that moment, Ivanka Trump felt strangely calm. The truth had a momentum of its own now. All she had to do was let it flow. This is Ivanka Trump, she said into the phone, her voice steady. And yes, I have something to say. The White House call was brief but intense. Ivanka listened more than she spoke, her face growing more determined with each passing minute. No, she finally said. I won't delay. This isn't about politics anymore. She paused, listening. Then do what you have to do. So will I. As she hung up, Jared looked concerned. What did they say? They're trying to get ahead of it. Damage control. She turned to Anderson. How many more agents are ready to come forward? 23 at last count, growing by the hour. He showed her his phone. Look at this group chat. The screen was filled with messages from former agents, each sharing their own pieces of the puzzle. Some had kept photos, others had saved texts. All of them had stories, suddenly. Martha's voice came through again. "Mrs. Kushner, I'm sorry, but Mr. Trump Jr. is here. He's quite insistent." Ivanka and Jared exchanged glances. Before they could respond, Don Jr. burst through the door. "Have you lost your mind?" he demanded. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to this family?" Jared started, but Don Jr. cut him off. "Save it. This isn't about you." He turned to his sister. "Dad's having chest pains, Ivanka. Actual chest pains. Is that what you want?" "Don't," Ivanka said sharply. "Don't you dare try to manipulate me. Not now. Manipulate. This is reality. Our father lied." The words exploded from her with unexpected force. "He lied. We lied. Everyone lied. And people died because of those lies." The room fell silent. Outside, the chants of protesters grew louder. Don Jr.'s face softened slightly. "Sis, listen to me. Whatever you think you know, there are bigger things at stake here. Things you don't understand." "Show her," Anderson said suddenly. Everyone turned to him. He was holding up his phone, displaying a video. "What is that?" Don Jr. asked, his voice suddenly uncertain. Security footage from Camera 4, Sector B. The angle that was mysteriously missing from all official records. Anderson pressed play. "Watch." For the next 3 minutes, no one spoke. The footage showed everything. Conversations that had been denied, orders that had been hidden, moments that changed history. Don Jr. sank into a chair, his face ashen. "Where did you get this?" "The same place I got everything else," Anderson replied. "From people who couldn't live with the lies anymore." Ivanka's phone buzzed again. The unknown number. CNN about to break news story. Major player coming forward. As if on cue, the office TV lit up with breaking news. A former high-ranking official was holding a press conference, confirming everything in Ivanka's documents. "Jesus," Don Jr. whispered. "This is really happening." "It was always going to happen," Reynolds said. "Too many people knew the truth. It was just a matter of time." Martha buzzed in again. "Mrs. Kushner, there's a call. It's your father again. This time." Ivanka didn't hesitate. "Put him through." "Baby girl," his voice was different now, older, tired. "Come to Mar-a-Lago. Let's talk about this, just you and me." She looked at the faces around her. Jared, concerned but supportive. Don Jr., still processing what he'd seen. Anderson and Reynolds, carrying years of buried truth. "No, Dad. We're past that now." She took a deep breath. "I'm going to tell them everything. All of it. You'll regret this," he said softly. "Maybe not today, but soon, maybe. But I'd regret staying silent more." After she hung up, Don Jr. stood. Slowly. "What happens now?" David said, checking his watch. "We get Mrs. Trump ready for her statement. The press is waiting." But before they could move, Martha's voice came through one final time. "Mrs. Kushner, I'm sorry, but you need to see this." They turned to the TVs. Every channel was showing the same thing. Another former Secret Service agent, holding his own press conference. As he spoke, Ivanka felt the ground shift beneath her feet. The truth was pouring out now, from every direction. There would be no stopping it. "It's time," she said quietly. As they prepared to leave the relative safety of the office, her phone lit up with one last message from the unknown number. "You're not alone anymore. The truth has its own power now." Outside, the Miami sun blazed down on a world that was about to change forever, and Ivanka Trump, surrounded by documents that would rewrite history, stepped forward to tell her part of the story. The congressional hearing room hummed with tense energy. Every seat was filled, cameras lined the walls, and the air felt electric with anticipation. Ivanka Trump sat at the witness table, the now infamous files arranged neatly before her. "Are you ready?" David whispered beside her. A week had passed since that morning in his office, a week that had changed everything. "Mrs. Trump," Chairman Harrison began. "You understand you are under oath?" "I do." Her voice was clear, steady. "Please, state your name for the record." "Ivanka Trump Kushner." The chairman leaned forward. "Mrs. Kushner, you've come forward with some extraordinary documents regarding the events of January 6, 2021. Before we discuss their contents, please tell the committee how these documents came into your possession." Ivanka glanced at the packed gallery. Her mother sat in the front row, face unreadable. Don Jr. and Eric were conspicuously absent. Jared sat with their children, who insisted on being there despite her reservations. A week ago, I was sorting through old files from my time in Washington as she began her testimony. Her phone buzzed silently in her pocket. The unknown number, more witnesses arriving. Stay strong. The chairman held up one of the documents. This communication timestamped 1422 on January 6th. Can you explain its significance? That message, Ivanka said carefully, proves that certain individuals were aware of the security risks hours before they claimed. A commotion at the back of the room drew everyone's attention. Another former Secret Service agent had arrived, accompanied by his lawyer. Mr. Chairman, the lawyer announced, my client wishes to corroborate Mrs. Kushner's testimony. Whispers rippled through the chamber. Ivanka's phone buzzed again. It's working. Truth breeds truth. Mrs. Kushner, a committee member, spoke up. Your father has called these documents fake news and suggested they were planted to discredit him. How do you respond? She thought of their last conversation, just hours before. Daddy, please, come forward with me. Tell the truth. You don't understand what you're doing, honey. Some truths are better left buried. Not this one. Back in the present, she straightened her shoulders. These documents are authentic. Multiple Secret Service agents have already verified their authenticity. And more importantly, she pulled out another file. We have video evidence. The room erupted as screens descended from the ceiling. What they showed next silenced everyone. *O. My God, someone whispered. Her phone buzzed continuously now. Don Jr. Stop this now, Eric. You've gone too far. Unknown number. Keep going. Almost there. Mar-a-Lago security. Your father needs to speak with you urgently. But Ivanka kept her focus on the committee, on the truth she'd carried for a week that felt like a lifetime. Mrs. Kushner, the chairman said after the video ended, do you realize the implications of what you're sharing? I do. She looked directly into the cameras. I understand the cost. To my family. To my father's legacy. To everything we built. She paused, gathering strength. But there's a higher cost to staying silent. Another commotion at the door. More former officials arriving. More witnesses ready to speak. It's like a dam breaking. David whispered, Ivanka's mother caught her eye from the gallery, giving a slight nod. Behind her, Jared held their children close, shielding them from the cameras. Mrs. Kushner, another committee member, spoke. These files suggest a level of coordination that goes beyond what was previously known. Can you elaborate? Before she could answer, her phone lit up with a message that made her blood run cold. From her father, final chance. Baby girl, don't do this to your family. She thought of the past week, the threats, the pressure, the attempts to discredit her, but also the courage of others who'd come forward, the weight of truth finally spoken, the coordination. She began, her voice growing stronger, began days before January 6th. These documents show, for the next hour, she laid it all out. Every detail, every connection, every hidden truth. More witnesses arrived as she spoke, each adding their own pieces to the puzzle. Her phone kept buzzing. CNN, ratings breaking records. Fox News, request for exclusive interview. Unknown number, almost done. One more revelation to go. White House president watching developments closely. The chairman held up another document. This final communication, can you explain its significance? Ivanka looked at the paper, remembering the moment she first read it in her Miami office. How everything had changed in that instant. This message, she said clearly, proves that the official timeline was deliberately altered, that crucial warnings were ignored, that people who could have prevented the violence chose not to. The room fell silent. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. And who, the chairman asked quietly, made those choices? This was it, the moment everything had been leading to. Her phone buzzed one final time. From her mother, tell the truth, baby, all of it. Ivanka took a deep breath, looked directly into the cameras, and began to speak. The truth, finally free, poured out like a river breaking through a dam. Outside the hearing room, crowds gathered around giant screens in Times Square. at Mar-a-Lago, across the nation. Inside, history listened as Ivanka Trump chose truth over family, conscience over loyalty. By the time she finished speaking, nothing would ever be the same. The silence that followed her revelations lasted only seconds before the room erupted. Camera flashes exploded like lightning, reporters jumped to their feet, and the chairman had to bang his gavel repeatedly for order. "Mrs. Kushner," he said when quiet finally returned, "you understand that what you've just revealed changes everything," she finished. "Yes, I know." Her phone had gone completely silent. No more messages, no more threats, no more unknown number. The truth was out now, echoing across every news channel, every social media platform, every corner of the country. A congressional aide rushed to the chairman, whispering something urgent. He looked up, face grave. "We've just received word that your father is holding an emergency press conference at Mar-a-Lago." Ivanka felt Jared's supportive presence behind her. Her children watched with wide eyes as their grandfather appeared. On the screens, his face flushed with anger. "My daughter," he began, "has been manipulated by the deep state." But before he could continue, something unprecedented happened. 3 more Secret Service agents walked into his press conference, their badges held high. "Mr. Trump," one said, loud enough for all cameras to hear, "we need to correct the record." Back in the hearing room, Ivanka watched as more truth-tellers stepped forward. Her phone finally buzzed. One last message from the unknown number. "It's done. The truth is free now. Thank you." The chairman cleared his throat. "Mrs. Kushner, given what we've learned today, what do you think should happen next?" She thought of her father, of her brothers, of everyone implicated in the web of lies she'd helped expose. But she also thought of the Constitution she'd sworn to protect, of the democracy that had almost been lost. "What happens next?" she said firmly. "Is justice." Reporters clamored for her attention as she left the hearing room. But she walked past them, head high. Her mother waited at the door. "You did the right thing," she whispered, hugging her daughter tight. Later that evening, in a secure location, Ivanka watched as the story dominated every network. Former officials were coming forward by the dozen, now each with their own pieces of the truth. "Mom," her daughter asked, "are we going to be okay?" Ivanka pulled her close. "We're going to be better than okay. We're going to be honest." Her phone lit up one final time, a message from history itself, telling her that some choices, no matter how hard, are worth the cost. The truth about January 6th was finally out, and nothing would ever be the same again. Asterisk.